Bakura is a recurring antagonist of the original Duel Monster series, and ultimately assumes the role as the lead villain for the final arc, but despite how powerful he seems to be and how often he takes the upper hand in duels, he hardly ever wins, with his only on-screen victory coming against Bonds, and that's not much to write home about. Despite those shortcomings, Bakura is still a formidable duelist, and his signature card debuts in Dawn of the Duel, Diabound Kernel, which was only released in the TCG about 6-7 years ago. Given how this card is the focal point of a large portion of the arc until Zork appears, we thought it'd be worth giving him his own deck. The premise of the Diabound deck is his ongoing plunge into the darkness. In the series, Diabound becomes stronger with every battle until finally reaching a form that can take on even the god cards. This stronger through battle is somewhat captured in the card Diabound Kernel, where it gains 600 attack when it attacks, but this deck is designed to showcase the evolution of Diabound from powerful monster to creature of darkness. The other side of this deck focuses on Bakura, or as we'll call the cards, the Bandit, and these cards serve as an engine to facilitate the summoning of Diabound Kernel and its stronger forms. We'll go through the forms of Diabound first, of which there are 5. The first one is of course the card that currently exists. Each successive form is unlocked after the current form battles and survives, whereafter it can be banished face down and the next form can be summoned from your hand or graveyard. This banishing face down symbolizes Bakura's irreversible plunge into darkness. The second form, called Diabound the Vengeful, comes in at 2300 attack. It too, along with all the other forms, has an effect where it gains 600 attack upon declaring an attack. And as mentioned, the only way to summon him is from the original Diabound Kernel surviving a battle and then banishing him face down during the end of the battle phase. This card has added protection of not being able to be targeted, and his effect allows you to target one monster on the field and negate its effects, then banish himself until the next standby phase. Now, if you're able to successfully battle with the Vengeful, the next form is Diabound the Wretched, who clocks in at 2900 attack. His protection is from destruction, and his unique effect is being able to target and destroy a face-up monster on the field. The form after that is Diabound the Evil, who boasts a powerful 3400 attack and is protected from being removed from your field by your opponent's card effects. His quick effect allows him to banish any card on the field without targeting, but that effect can only be used once every other turn. But that isn't even his final form. The most powerful version is Diabound the Darkness. Unlike the other ones before him, this guy is actually a fusion monster, though half the conditions are still the same. You still need to survive a battle with Diabound the Evil, but to bring out the darkness, you also need Illushu on the field, which we'll show here in a second, and so you banish both of them face down to bring this guy out. This card, being the 5th and final form, is, as you can imagine, a formidable boss monster as they come. Having the towers-like protection of being unaffected by anything, can't be tributed, and his ignition effect is basically a Trishula every turn. Really, the only way to get around him is if your opponent happens to run an Egyptian god card, but since that's likely not the case, bringing him out is basically a win condition, and very much well deserved. I'll just say this, that through numerous rounds of testing we've done, we have only brought this guy out once, and that happened to be in a duel where Skill Drain was already on the field, so couldn't really use his full effect to begin with. In other words, this is a very hard card to bring out, and given its effect, as it should be. Now let's talk about Illushu. Illushu is also from the anime and ends up fusing with Diabound to make its final form, but for the card purposes, it accomplishes quite a bit more. First, you can discard him to target one Diabound Kernel monster and it gains one of the following effects. Either it can't be destroyed in battle that turn, or is unaffected by your opponent's card effects that turn. And if you go with the battle protection, you also get to add a Diabound monster from your deck to your hand if that targeted Diabound battles. So it essentially guarantees you going into the next form if you get this effect to go off. His other effect is that if a monster you control is destroyed, you can add him from your graveyard to your hand. So a good way to recycle him and get him on the field for that last piece to bring out the darkness. Now we get into the Bandit monsters. There are 3 of them, the Bandit Child, the Bandit Expert, and the Bandit King, and they each have an effect alongside a floating effect. The Bandit Child can special summon a Diabound monster from your hand or grave at the cost of 1000 life points. So good for getting things going or reclaiming a higher form of Diabound that has been destroyed. Also, if the child is sent from field to grave, he brings out the Bandit Expert, who can negate a monster effect once while on the field by sending a Diabound monster from deck to grave. So a good way to pile up your grave with the Diabound forms. He floats into the Bandit King, who when summoned, can discard a card from both players' hands, and if the card you discard from your opponents is a monster, you can add a Diabound or Kernel card from your deck to your hand. Finally, the King floats into Diabound Kernel himself. And that does it for the monsters. Let's take a look at the spells. These are all about facilitating the transformation of Diabound, starting with the Hidden Kernel, which sends a Diabound monster from deck to grave, then adds an Illushu from your deck to your hand. Next is Tablet of Diabound, a quick play spell that allows you to special summon a Diabound monster from your hand or graveyard, and also gives it protection from battle that turn. Then we have Kernel Pop, a quick play spell that allows you to destroy a monster on the field if you control a Diabound monster, then allows you to evolve it into the next form. This is the deck's one way to bring out the next form without needing to go into the battle phase, which also makes it possible to bring out a higher form on the first turn of the duel. Next we have Kernel of Truth, a continuous spell that allows you to pitch a Diabound card to draw one card, and also has the effect where you can forego the banishing part of the Diabound monster's effects, just in case you'd rather retain their attack boost or maintain that field presence. Alongside the Diabound spells, we have the Bandit spells. First is the Motive of the Bandit, which allows you to search any Bandit card except itself from your deck. The other is the field spell of the deck Hideout of the Bandit, which has a few effects. The first two, you can only use them once per turn, and they are to either discard a Bandit card to add a Kernel or Diabound card from your deck to your hand, or discard a Kernel or Diabound card and add a Bandit card from your graveyard to your hand. So being able to assemble whatever pieces you need to protect your board via the Bandit cards or facilitate Diabound's transformation, and alongside the other search cards, the aim is to make this deck as consistent as possible. Its last effect makes it so your opponent cannot respond to the effects of the Bandit monsters you control with their own monster effects, allowing those bandits to move freely throughout the darkness. This deck has a few traps. The first is Memories of the Bandit, a trap that allows you to summon a bandit monster from your grave, but then destroy it at the end phase. So you can pull out a monster negate with Expert, discard a card from your opponent's hand with King, or bring out Diabound with Child, and then get access to their floating effects when destroyed as well in the end phase. Next is Vengeance of the Bandit, a card that allows you to special summon Diabound Kernel from anywhere. If your opponent removes a monster from your field, then you can pop a card as well. And finally, we have Ancient Tools of the Bandit, no relation to 7 Tools of the Bandit, which allows you to pay 1000 life points to negate a spell or trap if you have the Bandit monster on the field. So much like the rest of the deck, the traps are all about controlling the board. So that does it for the Diabound Kernel support. Hope you enjoyed. Would love to hear anything you'd add or change about this deck. Make sure you like and subscribe. Next up, we'll build out the archetype for one of the most iconic cards of the entire game and series.